is working. I think it will work. Let's clip this somewhere logical so I don't mess up the wire. All right, everybody. Let's. I'm going to wait for you guys to trickle in, and then we're going to get into it. I've got a list of things to talk about today. So let me move this slightly here. And I'm going to change my chat box today, I hope. There we go. Hi, Eric. Thank you, thank you. So I'm going to change the chat box a little bit today so I can maybe not have such a long trail of conversations and maybe zone in on specific questions. And I've got my list here of things I want to discuss. And I want to jump into YouTube really quick and edit the description of this live stream. So give me 20 seconds. Edit
Hi, Eric.
video. I know, 3 streams at once, right? Oh, by the way, if I talk too loud, please do say, okay, I need to bring it down a little because I can make it a slight adjustment. But I think I've kind of hit that right spot as long as I don't get too excited. All right, so I want to add this link first. That way if somebody wants facts, they can read it right this minute. So there's that. And then we're going to add the upcoming events because people want to know about those. No, it really was 30 seconds. And I think I'm just going to hit save for now. All right. So, look, I'm kind of on time. I'm not crazy behind. So here are the things I want to discuss with you. It's 2019. It's February already. It's February 9th. This year is flying by. And I have finally mixed up a batch of salt. So I've got a bucket here of what I use. Actually, I used more than a bucket. So let me put you guys back on screen so I can see what the heck you're seeing. And I'm going to close this so it doesn't waste any processor. All right, so this is the salt that I mixed up. It took a bucket and more than a half to do my salt. And actually, I'm still not quite exactly on target. This is called Royal Nature. It's out of Israel. And a company out of California asked me to give them my feedback. So I said, well, I need enough to make 265 gallons of water because I don't make small batches. And they said, okay. And so I'm reading the bucket. And it says on the bucket, if you want 1.026 or 35 ppt, you're going to get 158 gallons out of this bucket. Well, I pretty much make, my poly tank is 265, but that's probably outside dimensions, and there's room at the top for air. So I probably make about 250 gallons of total liquid volume. And I did a bunch of math, and I believe I did my math right, which came to 36 kilograms of salt to get 1.026. So right before the stream, I ran over there and I did some salinity checking, and I was really excited, and I was hoping I nailed it. And it was 1.025 on the first try, and then it was 1.023, and then it was 1.022, and then it was 1.023, and it was 1.023. So I guess it's 1.023. So I might need to add another, I don't know, half a kilo. I'm doing it all in kilograms just because of the roundness of the numbers. I think a bucket weighs 53.6 pounds. And I need an additional 23.4 pounds. So I tried. I did my best, using math to get the right salinity so I wouldn't have to keep climbing up the ladder to pour in another cup of salt. But clearly I need a little bit more. In addition, now that I have salt mix, there's something else I need to do. So I finally got my Icp test, and I'm excited about this. So I ordered a bunch of them. And I'm going to send in water for my reef that hasn't had a water change in, get ready, 18 months. I'm going to also test the water in my frag system that probably hasn't had a water change in over a year. And I'm going to also send in a sample just because of the new salt mix I mixed up, because I'm curious what kind of results I'll get from a brand of salt I've never used before. So those will all go in this week. This upcoming week, and I'll find out what those numbers are. Oh man, I forgot something. I'll be right back. I didn't actually forget it. I forgot to bring it over here. So this came in. This is the new dosing pump that I'm being a little optimistic because I have no reason to just doubt it. I was selling a different type of dosing pump for my website by IceCap, and they no longer exist. You can't get them. So I needed a new dosing pump, and Comore came out with their new one. It's interesting to me that the tubes are pointing up on this picture. I would have thought they'd point down. So I don't know anything about these other than the price. And the retail price of these dosing pumps is very affordable at $60. So here is your pump. Do a quick unboxing here. And I'll be doing a video, of course, about it. You've got your power supply with your plug that will go in. And yes, there's another piece that goes onto that to make it stick out farther. And we have some tubing, a calibration device, the part of the plug I told you we needed, the dosing head, and then what appears to be a daisy chain wire so that you can run several of these in succession. And I need to find out how you can stack these or mount them to each other, but I believe you just press these on the orientation you want, either this way or apparently you can go this way. I don't know why you'd want to go up, but I'll find out. I'll read the book. So that came in, and I wanted to try one out, and like I said, I was being optimistic, and I just ordered a bunch for the shop, hoping that they will work out exactly as promised. So that is coming up very soon. Put all this away so I don't lose any of the parts. Oh, and I still forgot to bring something else over here, but that's okay. I'll just describe it to you. Actually, this is the pump I'm using on my calcium reactor right now. I've been using it for the last, I think about 3 months. And after a while, you need to replace the... Can I show you a picture of it easily? Well, not really. We can try. So on here, this piece of tubing right here needs to be replaced periodically. And so I ordered in those because I need to get a new one for mine. It's 3 months old. I read somewhere or heard, I think on the CoralView website, that the tubing is only good for 2,000 now, 2,000 continuous hours. And I'm running my pump pretty hard. So I am going to replace that tubing and see if it makes any difference on how it operates. Kind of what I'm going to run into, and I hate to say this, but I'm just going to be honest. Mine's a little bit noisy, and I would have loved it to be dead silent. I don't know if they can be dead silent at the rate I'm running it. Maybe if you run it really slow, yeah, you don't hear a thing, but when you're moving along at 80 milliliters per minute, it's going to be a little bit noisier. And I've tried using silicone grease to grease it up, and then I'm thinking maybe the next part is the tubing just has to be replaced. So we'll find out. So I picked up a couple more of these for my shop because I'm sure someone out there is going to want one, and I'll have them available. All right, and that is it for the those topics. I wanted to talk about LiveRock Enhance, my first initial experience with this product. So this is from Reef Bright, the same people that make my lights. They sent me a sample, I mentioned it last week, and 2 days ago I stuck it in my Reef. And let me just kind of explain what I think I understand, and there's more to learn, obviously. And I'll be adding a link about, from the actual website of what it is. But it's supposed to increase the porosity of your LiveRock, and it's supposed to add some more beneficial bacteria to your reef to help consume things. So here's what happens. You scoop, there's a little tiny scoop in here, and it's a powder. I don't remember if I opened this last week. I don't think I did because it was sealed shut. So inside you'll find instructions, which are these. I did a picture of this on Instagram. So you got your instructions, you got your little spoon, and you got your dust. Try not to spill this into my cup of coffee. And when you're done using it, they suggest keeping it in the fridge, but it's not going to last me that long. So the way this stuff works, it's 1 scoop per 25 gallons. I believe I read somewhere. Yeah. And so I put in enough for 400 gallons of water instead of 450. I want to use a little bit less than the full strength recommended to see what happens. And what happens is my tank, the stuff floated on the surface, which I didn't really want to go into the overflow box, but at the same time, it's affecting all the water in the system, so it doesn't really matter. If it were to land in a filter sock, I don't think it would be a detrimental waste, but at the same time, I think that's not the way to go. I'd kind of lean toward mixing up with some tank water and then pour it into your tank. So what does it do? What is the point? My reef is over 5 years old. That rock has been in my tank for over 5 years. The only thing I can possibly do with that rock to make it clean is to take a power head and blow it off and knock out some detritus. This is a bunch of enzymes and bacteria that will eat and consume, and you know, it kind of reminds me of the scrubbing bubbles inside the commercial for the toilet bowl. So I was like, you know what? Why not? Let's see what it does. So I put it in my reef. The stuff floated on the surface. It looked like it was snowing in the reef. The water got cloudy, not milky, but cloudy for a few hours. It was pretty quick becoming cloudy and stayed cloudy for about 3 or 4 hours. And then the clarity wasn't 100%, but it was a lot better. And then it got better and better. You could use this late at night. What did it do was all my SPS corals started sliming, and they were sending off all this, not mesenterial fibers, just sloughing off the protective coating, I guess you'd say. Kind of makes me feel like what I'm doing is I'm putting peroxide on a wound and I'm washing it clean. And so that's what I did with my reef. And I watched very closely to see what would happen. The sea anemone kind of closed up. My toadstool leather completely closed up, and I'm sure it's because those little white things were tickling it to death and it just retracted. But nothing else was bothered. The fish weren't bothered. None of the corals looked bothered. The SPS, like I said, left the stuff off the surface of their skin, which in a way is good, because if your SPS coral has a coating of mucus, and you get that off of the coral for an occasional time, not all the time, but on occasion, it kind of lets it breathe and kind of take in more nutrients and so forth. I don't know, I'm going to use it a little bit more. I just did one treatment, and it's recommended to use it every other day. And I called up Reef Brite and I said, so what is this stuff? What's the plan? Am I supposed to be using this every other day for the rest of my life? Is this something you do once a year? Is it something you do in an emergency? Where's the thought process behind this product? Because, I didn't really know much about it. And he basically was indicating that you can use it for cycling new rock, you can use it for establishing a new tank to give it bacteria, or you can use it as basically, I did, as a reef cleaner. So that's what I did. And I even noticed a spot where an SPS coral was old, dead, and kind of hideous. It became white. But the other corals, they're alive, so it was the dead piece that got white. I was like, so that's what made me kind of feel like peroxide, how it cleans. So yeah, I'm going to do it again. And here is the ultimate benefit that I ran across that I think some of you might glom onto. I've had a patch of cyano growing in my anemone cube, which is tied in with a 400-gallon reef, that has been just kind of there. And I was thinking in my head, I really just need to treat the tank for cyano and just get rid of that, just so the sand is clean. And after using this stuff, that sand is white. And I was like, it gets rid of cyano. So let me not say that, because that's not accurate. What happens with, Cyano bacteria is exactly that, it's bacteria. And it exists in freshwater, brackish water, salt water. It's in the world. It's deep in the planet. It exists. It always exists. You can't get rid of it. But when it's red or green or blue, we don't like it, because now we see it and it's covering things and it freaks us out. But it exists even when you don't see it. By adding more bacteria to your tank of a different type, it can outcompete the cyanobacteria and kind of beat it down into submission and make it not be visible, is the present idea. Not be present is the idea. And so my frag system actually has a lot of cyano. So I'm going to use it again today, and then again in 2 days, and again in a couple more days. And I'm going to see if maybe this stuff will just eat it away, which would be really kind of cool, instead of having to actually use Red Cyano RX or ChemiClean. So I will let you guys know if that worked. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But at the same time, it's rejuvenating the rock. It's opening the pores. It's allowing it to breathe. It's consuming some stuff. And who knows what it might do to potential nitrate and phosphate levels. So we'll see. And I will let you guys know. That is the end of all that intro stuff. Real quick, later this month, on the 23rd of February, I'll be in Seattle for Reef Works. Then on the 26th, I'll be in Florida for the FMAS Club meeting. And then the end of March, first part of April, I will be here in Dallas for Aquashella. So all those links are in this video's description. Let's talk about sand. And I mentioned sand last week. Someone, replied that I didn't give them enough information. And I know we've talked about sand in the past, but we haven't talked about sand maintenance. So if you have a person that, if you are a person that doesn't have sand in your tank at all, this is a very boring topic for you. Or maybe I'll convince you to get sand in your tank. So this is not a sandbed versus bare bottom tank debate. Because everyone has their own taste of what they like the look of. I prefer an aquarium with sand in the bottom. I don't want to see the glass bottom or the acrylic bottom. I want there to be substrate. I'd like there to be rock. I'd like to see things growing and crawling and moving and emerging. And I love all that. And if you are running a bare bottom tank, you're kind of cheating yourself out of some of those cool effects. At the same time, and then there's one more benefit, by the way. And that is when your light comes down and you have a light colored sand, the whitish sand we like, it reflects the light on the underside of your corals, so they get light from both sides. So I really do like sand. There are people that want so much flow in their tank that they feel they cannot have sand. I've got a buddy with a 1,000-gallon reef, and I keep telling him, let's put some sand in your tank. And he said, Mark, it would never stay put. I'm like, let's find out. But I'm not going to do that to him. Plus, he's trying to grow corals on the bottom. He would love to have the entire glass covered on a 10-foot tank with coral. He's got a couple of patches that are really cool, and then he has a couple of patches that are not so pretty. They has to scrape clean. So if you can get Sophastria to cover the entire bottom, for example, that's amazing. If you could cover it with zoanthids or something like that, that'd be really cool. But sand, in the original, the olden days of reef keeping, we were really aiming for 4 to 6 inches of sand in your aquarium, and that was called a deep sand bed or a DSB. And a deep sand bed had a rule, and that is don't touch the sand bed. Very specific. Can't touch it, don't mess with it, don't you dare piss it off. And it was kind of a funny thing because, sand is sand. But at the same time, there were people out there that were adamant, you can't even clean the area of the glass, the little bit of crap between the sand and the glass. Like if you do that, oh, what could you possibly do? And it really won't do any damage at all because you're talking about a ½ an inch of space out of an entire aquarium. You're not going to unearth or unleash anything horrible. I would like to recommend that you have some kind of crew that walks through the sand and keeps the top surface clean. And I'm going to get into that in a moment, but I just wanted to first mention about these deep sand beds, because later on people were thinking, well, what if I just want 2 inches of sand? What if I don't want to look at this much sand in the bottom of my tank? And it's a valid question. So there were people that decided to go with 2 inches of sand. There were people that decided to go with 1 inch of sand. And that's why we ended up with people going bare bottom with no sand at all, because they just didn't like how their sand got dirty. And they were annoyed, and they thought, well, if I just get rid of it, it can't be dirty, and I can siphon out detritus. Part of the reason I wouldn't like a bare bottom system is because it looks like a museum to me, a museum display. And secondarily, that means I have to keep vacuuming the bottom of my tank, which I'm not going to do. So I definitely am a sand bed guy, and I actually like a deep sand bed. I would like to have a 4-inch sand bed myself, and that's what the 400-gallon Reef started with. Let's talk about sand grain size. I'm using Reef Flakes, which is a Tropic Eden sand that you can get from Premium Aquatics. I just happen to have a towel from Premium Aquatics, so I do recommend them for buying purchases. Among your different stores you shop from, if you haven't heard of them, you should definitely be shopping from them as well. And they carry the Tropic Eden sand, and they also carry live sand from Tropic Eden. When I set up my 400-gallon back in 2011, I had a pallet of the sand shipped here, as well as a bunch of trays that looked like the deli tray that you would have hamburger meat in. It was a tray, sand, water on top, and then that clear cellophane that you peel off. And I put in like 8 or 10 of those into my tank as well. That was to seed the sand bed with live sand. Now, sorry, my nose has been trying to run all day. I think I'm catching whatever Than has. He's doing a live stream right now on the Titled Gardens channel, and he has no voice because he's been dealing with the flu. And so he's to the point where I was teasing him he should be whispering his show instead of talking. But back to the sand. If you go with a really fine grade of sand, which was what was recommended back in the old days, like I said, 15 years ago, they were saying you should use oolitic sand. and oolitic sand was 0.1 of a millimeter. It was itty bitty. It was dust. And if you just barely touched it, it was like moon dust. And I didn't like that kind of sand personally. I found it was way too fine for my needs. And the sand that I'm using is 3 millimeters. So if you're measuring grain size, or if you're just wanting to get sand like Mark, you want Tropic Eden Reef Flake, and that one is the 3 millimeter size. If you want to go with a smaller grade, you can. I find that this one here is just heavy enough that I can have decent flow in my tank and not move it. But you know, it just also depends on the orientation of your power heads and your returns and what they're pointing at. So you may have to adjust it. To have that perfectly level sand bed, like, you know, like what would we call it, like in a garden, it's not realistic in a reef tank because the reef tank is a living biotope. And, you know, to have hills and valleys is kind of natural to me. And it's what I see in the ocean. So it's what I would, you know, I wouldn't sit there and stress that you can't have a perfectly flat sand bed. But if you want to rake it smooth from time to time, you definitely can. It just won't stay that way. It's going to change on you again. I did bring a bag of sand in here because I wanted to show you something. So, this is a bag of live sand from CaribSea, a rag alive, and inside the bag there's water, and there's sand, and there's bacteria. And once you tear this bag open and you add it to your tank, it's going to have oxygen added to the system, and it's going to allow this, it's creaking at me, it's going to allow this sand to come to life. And I remember, and I always repeat this because I feel like there's always someone that didn't hear it. There's people that debate, there's no way that's alive, it's in a sealed bag, it's been on a shelf for how long, it's been in the sun, it's been in the cold, there's no way. But there are bacteria out there that will stay dormant until the circumstances are perfect. And at that point, that's when your live sand comes to life. So putting a bag of live sand on top of your reef, on top of your regular sand, your dry sand with water in the tank, will activate it and bring it to life, and you end up seeing all kinds of life in your tank, which is really, really nice. And you need the bacteria. I mean, we talked about that in the beginning of this live stream. Bacteria is so important, and in this case, that is part of the live sand bacteria. So bacteria doesn't live all the way through your sand bed to the bottom. It really seems to dwell mostly in the top ½ inch. So I would not fill an entire tank with live sand. It just seems an expensive way to go that's unnecessary, because really all that's going to live is the top ½ inch. I would also emphasize that there is the ability to add more sand to your tank after it's been running for a while out of one of those bags right there. And I wanted to get into that, and I've got a link for that also inside the video's description. I already put it in there before we started. So what I did in the past, I used, okay, one more thing. You need to know what kind of sand you're buying. And, you know, I mentioned a couple of brands, CaribSea or Tropic Eden, there's more out there. What you want is calcium-based sand, and you don't want silica-based sand. So don't get silica sand, which is used in sandblasting. Don't get play sand, which is used in playgrounds. You want to use calcium-based sand. And the way you know if it's calcium-based is put some in a bowl, add some white vinegar, and see if it bubbles. And if it bubbles, it's dissolving, because vinegar dissolves calcium carbonate, and you end up knowing exactly the type of sand you have. And if it's just lying in the bowl doing nothing, then it is silica, and it's probably not going to look very pretty in your tank. And I can immediately see a tank that is silica sand just by walking up. The look is super obvious. It has this weird gray look to it that kind of makes me think of a million little pearls. It's just, and it's not pretty, and it tends to grow a weird diatom film on the surface on a regular basis. Oh, also, before I go any further, I want to emphasize also, in the old days we used crushed corals, and when I'm talking about in the old days, I'm talking about the 70s and 80s when I was a kid, and my parents had tanks. They had crushed coral substrate, and so that's what everyone thought you're supposed to use. Well, it turns out, and I did that same thing in '98 when I got in this hobby, I put in crushed coral, and my nitrates went through the roof, and I could never vacuum the crushed coral enough to get all the detritus out. It just, you cannot remove enough water and detritus. And what I would do, like I had to move my aquarium from one part of the room to the other part of the room. I thought, great, I'll vacuum the substrate. And I vacuumed and vacuumed, and I poured in more salt water, and I kept vacuuming, and I poured in more salt water, and I kept vacuuming till I got out as much as I possibly could. And I thought, man, that was a lot of work. I'm going to stop using crushed coral. And that's why it's really not recommended in a reef tank. It might be fine in a fish-only system, something you're going to maintain, But for a reef tank with a sand bed that we want to basically help with denitrification and keep your system nice and clean, and to give a place for your critters and bugs to hide and worms to emerge from and snails to submerge into, you're going to want something that is a finer grade of sand that doesn't trap all the detritus that crushed coral will. All right. Hey, I'm glad I just see someone asked, what about crushed coral? So I tackled that. All right, so when you run a reef tank for a little while, a year and a half, you'll notice that your sand bed seems to shrink and get smaller and smaller, and you're like, where is it going? Well, especially with a deep sand bed, what happens is the area in the lowest part of the substrate becomes anoxic, and that means it has a lack of oxygen, and the pH is lower in that spot, and the calcium melts in a lower pH. So what's actually happening is your calcium-based sand is dissolving, and it's adding itself to the system, which is allowing coralline to grow and fish and corals to absorb what they need to grow. So it's not wasted, but it's weird when you're like, I put in all the sand and my tank seems to be missing sand. Where's it going? And some people might attribute it to, oh, I do a lot of vacuuming. I've actually depleted it. I sucked it down the drain. I saw all the sand. It's really not that much that you pulled out through your vacuuming process. It's actually dissolving because it's down deep and it's melting. So you need to add more sand from time to time. And I used to recommend, because this is what I was doing many years ago with a different reef tank, to put in 1 bag of live sand every 6 months. So a bag of live sand is maybe 40 pounds. I'm sure there's smaller bags you can buy too for smaller tanks, but I'm just giving an example. Like this one here, it's like 35 or 40 pounds. That bag of sand, I want to add it to my existing reef tank, but I don't want to have a big mess. And so here is the process. You're going to take the bag itself, you're going to rinse it off so the bag is clean all over the outside, wipe it down so there's no kind of chemicals or any kind of transport particulates or anything that's happened from the point of it being made to the point of going into your tank. You want the bag to be clean. You're going to stop all the flow in the tank. You're going to move some corals out of the way so that it's just a big open area right there in the center. You're going to take your bag and snip the top corner, and you're going to lower the bag into the tank and turn it over and pour it out into a mound. And then you can go ahead and spread it out everywhere you want. And the idea is to spread it out so it's covering about 1/2 inch of your sand bed. You don't want to add sand and bury it 2 inches deep because even though you've brought in new live sand, everything that was beneficial and alive you've just murdered because it got smothered. So if you are dealing with a certain system that doesn't have room for that much sand and you want to use half a bag, you can. You don't have to pour it all out at once. You can use a piece of it at a time. Just take the bag back out and set it in a bucket until you're ready to do the rest. But adding some sand to your tank will definitely help with increasing the bacteria that's in the sand bed, the biofauna, you want that, and it's going to increase the height of it again. And like I said, my tank's 5 years old. It could use some sand. I know that my cucumbers, I moved some of it into the rock work, but when you look along the front, it seems to be much lower than it used to be. Kind of want to build that up, and I don't necessarily want to try and scoop it out from under the rocks. I think I just want to get more to replace what's lacking. So I would get more of the exact same type that I have. Okay. Let's say you got an aquarium with a bunch of sand and you wanted to wash it out because it's dirty, it's used, it's been around for more than 6 months. And this is especially true if you're moving from one location to another and you've got an aquarium with sand. What do you do with that sand? I always tell anyone if the tank is less than 6 months old, just move the sand over into the new tank or move the tank with the sand or take the sand out, put the tank in place, put the sand back in, you're good to go. But if it's over 6 months old, I tell them to rinse the sand clean. And I have a video about how to do that on my channel. Just Google rinse sand melev and you'll get it. And you want to rinse it out completely so that all the detritus is gone, all the decay is gone, all the waste, any garbage that you don't want in there is gone, and you're down to just clean sand. The clean sand will go into the new tank, and then you need some live sand to seed it. And no, it will not cycle your tank. Clean sand does not cycle anything. It's like washing your car and saying, I'm going to get different mileage now. It's just not going to change it. It's clean sand. It's all it is. You're not going to cycle your tank. All right. Critters that benefit the sand bed are going to be cucumbers because they clean the sand. They actually eat it and they poop out the other side, nice clean sand. Nassarius snails live in it and move through it. Conchs live in it and smooth and glide across the surface and will submerge. And by the way, if you've never had a conch before, they will submerge themselves into the sand bed for weeks at a time. And I believe that while they're doing that, they're growing their shell a little bit before they emerge again and come back to work. So I used to dig mine up like, what are you doing? And I'd put them back on top of the sand. And I did that like 2 or 3 times. And I started thinking maybe that's a natural thing and I should leave them alone. And that's part of my keep your hands out of the tank rule. Leave your pets alone. So yes, the conchs, they grew on their own. They got larger over time. They will bury in the sand. And by the way, one sand conch per 2 square feet of sand. So if you have a 6-foot by a 2-foot tank, do the math and say, okay, that means I can have 3 fighting conchs or 3 sand conchs in my tank. That's it. Don't put in 6, don't put in 8, you'll starve them. Other things that will help your sand bed stay clean would be hermit crabs, believe it or not, because they walk through it and they stir it up. And even sand, I almost said it. I'm going there. Serpent starfish will help clean the sand as well as they look for things. But I do not recommend, and it is not recommended to put a sand sifting starfish in a reef tank. It will move a lot of sand. It will bury itself down in the sand. It is looking for every trace of life in the sand. It wants to eat every bit of life out of it until you have a dead sand bed. And what happens to a dead sand bed? You grow hideous algae on it. So sand sifting stars have no business in a reef tank. They're great in a fish only. They're probably okay in a predator tank if the predator doesn't eat starfish. And why do they bury themselves? They bury themselves to protect themselves from being eaten. That's why they're doing it. They're not just having fun. They're looking to stay out of sight, and they're looking for food the entire time. So highly important that you don't put one in your tank. And you might say, well, yeah, but my sand looks so good. It's like, yeah, it does now. Can you keep it? Yes. Can you make it work? Probably. I guess you can keep putting in live sand more often to keep it fed. You can give it some food too, but it's literally its own job is to find all trace of life and eradicate it. So I don't recommend that in a reef tank. And anyone that has one should rethink that decision. My opinion. It's more like a global opinion. Sorry. I'm just telling the truth. Sand sifting blennies are another method some people like to use to make their sand look clean because they want to have a fish that will scoop it in their mouth and then they eat what's left and the clean sand rains out of their gills back onto the reef. But the problem is they bury everything you own. So if you have some really pretty acans or you have a clam or you have Recordia or whatever's down low, it'll be covered. And I have watched at public aquariums, they have all the corals up high on rocks near the lights because the lights are way up here. They put the corals here and then the water goes all the way down to here and there's some sand down here and you see the stuff moving around the bottom and you see these corals. And I watched a Blenny get a mouthful of sand and go all the way up and then drop it on all the corals. And I was just like, man, those fish are a pain in the butt. So I don't really recommend that fish in a reef tank only because when it smothers a coral, if you don't get to it quickly enough, the coral will just die and you'll have a skeleton. So you have to decide if you're there enough to keep an eye on it to make sure you have a model child. And it could work, but if you decide you want things down on the sand like fungias, you're gonna have a problem. Well, you're not gonna have any fungias, no problem at all. But yes, I don't recommend that particular fish. All right, one more thing about sand, and then I'm gonna start addressing your questions. I'm sorry I've been kind of ignoring the chat because I'm trying to stay on target and on topic. If you want to have a nice clean sand bed and you don't care about any of the invertebrates that can keep it clean, you're thinking, I just want to handle it, you can vacuum it. The thing is about vacuuming sand beds, the general rule of thumb is if you vacuum sand beds, you're going to have to keep doing that on a regular basis to keep that nice pretty look. Because every time you vacuum it, you're turning it over. And so you're basically keeping it there for looks and nothing else. It's not going to benefit you because you keep changing it. And so it can't denitrify, it doesn't have the layers or the strata of life here and then nothing here, and then low oxygen here because you keep vacuuming. So if you want it just for looks, you can then siphon, and that could be 2 times a week. Once a week minimum, probably. For someone that's being really particular and wants their sand to look a certain way, they'll probably siphon it weekly. That's probably a person that does a weekly water change too. For myself, I never siphon the sand bed. In my reef, never. In my anemone cube, I have, because number one, it's an anemone cube, it's not a reef tank, and there's 14 to 16 clownfish in there with, a body of water, and they're all pooping. And so that one has a 2-inch sand bed, and I have vacuumed it twice in 5 years. And I pulled out a lot of brown funk. And the fact that I have a nice big barrel of salt water ready right now, it gives me a reason to want to siphon it again. And what I have to do is I have to move everything off the sand bed. And when I siphon it out, I'm going to not only remove detritus, I'm going to lose things I like. I'm going to lose pods. I'm going to lose spaghetti worms. I'm going to lose, I think they're called turbellids, which is like 2 white worms that come up. I'll probably suck out Neptasia. A few things like that. I might even have some Valonia down under the surface that'll be removed. So, I mean, there's some things that go out that are good, and there's some things that go bad. But siphoning sand, if that's your thing, it's a regular thing. And if you just try to do it occasionally, and what I mean by occasionally is like every other month, you're going to be kind of between stages. You're never really going to like your sand. So it's either sand it regularly or don't sand it at all and have a nice cleanup crew that keeps it stirred up and get your water parameters perfect. The better your water parameters, the more on target it is, the more likely your sand is going to look nice. And listen, one of the biggest problems I've seen for the last 12 months, maybe longer, maybe the last 24 months, is that people are getting this weird brown stuff on their surface of their sand, and it drives them nuts. And they're not sure if it's diatoms, or if it's dinoflagellates, or if it's cyano. It's always one of those 3 of the accusation, right? And no matter what it is, you don't want it there. So we need to eliminate it. And one of the things that seems to be the dominant reason for seeing this on the sand is 0 nitrate, 0 phosphate, which is why people have been dosing nitrate and they've been dosing phosphate, trying to raise their numbers from 0 to get a better, cleaner looking sand bed. And that plus additional bacteria will help with consuming whatever's happening there. But number one, I wish we all knew exactly what we're looking at. Because even when I look at a picture, I can't be 100% positive. Diatoms are a brown dust, and they are a food, and they're totally normal in a new tank. In an older tank, you really shouldn't be seeing diatoms. That's unusual. And diatoms are a food for bacteria. That's why when we cycle a tank and we go through the diatom stage and we've added bacteria, the bacteria will eat it, which then in turn makes the bacteria proliferate, and you have more bacteria. And that is part of the circle of life of what we're trying to accomplish in our closed ecosystem. But if you get more of a darker brown or reddish or, yeah, that's pretty much it. Could be brown or reddish is more common, but if it's bubbly, it could be leaning toward dinoflagellates. There's something else out there that people have been mentioning from looking under microscopes. I think it's called Siporax. I might be saying that wrong. And I don't know much about that. So I can't really talk about it, because I don't know anything. But it's another one of these strains that we're having to encounter, and it seems to be in these systems that were set up with dry sand and dry rock. And that's why I'm a live sand and live rock kind of guy. Alrighty, so that is everything. I'm going to start answering your questions now. So let me look at the screen here. And if my moderators can show me a couple of questions I missed, that would be awesome. I'm going to scroll. Oh my God, there's a whole bunch of you guys in here. Right now we've got 125 people in here. That means we stole some of Than's people. Eric Vignola is one of my moderators, and he showed me a picture of his tank yesterday, and it was pretty, and it had 0 sand. And I mentioned all you need now is sand, and a few hours later there was a picture of a tank with some sand. It was great. He was all on top of it. That was great. Oh, okay. D asks, I'm going to throw this on the screen. Have you had old sand contribute to pH and nutrient problems, low pH, high phosphate? These are all the things that can happen. And D, I hope you're still here. When a tank has been running for a long time, multiple years, let's say 4, 5, 6, 8 years long, there's a concern that there's going to be death and black zones in the sand bed. Well, I've taken down my own 280-gallon reef that was 6 years old to the day, and when I broke it down, we siphoned out all the sand, or we scooped it out, and there was nothing black in there, so there was none of that. An older sand bed can harbor a lot of waste. It is absolutely possible. But I believe that by rejuvenating the sand bed with fresh, live sand from time to time, you're helping to keep it healthy. And that has been my experience. I set up the first aquarium with crushed coral in '98. Within a couple of years, maybe 3, probably 2001, I'm guessing, I switched over to sand. And the tank already did much better. And that tank ran for 7 years total. So I'd say 4 of it was with sand. And when I broke down that tank, there was nothing weird in that sand bed, and that was a shallow sand bed. My 55-gallon had a 4-inch sand bed. I broke it down after a couple of years. Nothing weird in it. No weird striations, no sulfuric smells, nothing like that. And then my 280 was set up, and that ran for 6 years. And when I had to break it down because it leaked, again, we just had dirty sand. And I just washed it out and used it again. I gave away a lot of it too because other people needed sand, and we know once you've washed it, it's clean sand. You can use it. It doesn't go bad. So if you end up coming across sand that is sulfuric or black, don't even try to save it. Just scoop that portion out and throw it away. Sort of like when you have a block of cheese in the refrigerator and part of it's got mold. You cut that off, but the rest of it's still good. I don't know if you guys freak out and throw it all away, but just cut off the bad. The rest of the cheese is still good. Same with sand. If you've got a big batch of good clean sand and you come across some weird spot, you can just scoop that out and toss it. That's not going to be a problem for you. But can it contribute to nutrient problems? I guess if it was dead sand, especially sand sifting starfish, just killed it, yes, then I think you're going to run into all kinds of problems. I'm sure I mentioned already, but Reefing with O asked me, what is the name of that product again? And it is called Live Rock Enhance. And I'm going to put a link to that in the video's description when the show is over. But it was cool that it made my sand look clean. And if it can make the frag system look algae-free, cyano-free, that'd be great. I mean, nothing wrong with that, right? Okay, here's a nice comment I like. I like the negative space sandbeds provide from an aquascaping point of view. I've always wondered if someone could cultivate a white coralline that they'd encourage on the bottom only for the same effect. So, you know, with a tank that has no sand at all. But yeah, when you look at some of these really amazing one-of-a-kind tanks, you know, they usually get shared on social media, right? And you'll see some rocks and some beautiful corals, and the water's crystal clear, and they have all this nice, clean, open sand. Sometimes I tend to think it's a fake tank. You know, in other words, it's like a Hollywood set where they set it up perfectly, get the shot, and then they break it down. My friend Mike, I think that's his name. It's been so long. He ran the website OregonReef.com, which still is in existence. And if you want to go check it out sometime, he had a fantastic tank that a lot of people grab his picture and share it on the web, but it's his tank that he used to run. And it's one of the reasons he inspired me to set up my 400-gallon because of him. His method, he set up his rock work up the sides, and he put like some kind of a channel along the bottom, and he poured sand down the middle. And every single month, he siphoned out all that sand and threw it away and put a new bag in there. And every single month, his tank looked fantastic because he put, you know, 1 bag of sand every month for 12 months. So he used 12 bags of sand a year for his 400-gallon tank. And great system, a little too OCD for me. But he didn't have to worry about sand getting dirty or doing anything weird. He just sucked it out and put a new bag in, and everything looked gorgeous. So that's kind of a neat system. I'm looking for questions. Well, 30 seconds of dead air. This must be driving you guys crazy. One person asked, is it advisable to rake your sand from time to time? Once in a while. You could, and you're raking the very top surface. That would just kind of stir it, and that's good. That's a good, thank you. So you can do that to kind of keep the surface loosened up. If your surface gets compacted, if it becomes hard and solid, then you're going to want to not break that up. Don't make that mistake. Whatever has become like stone, just pull it off the tank, throw it away. Trust me, you do not want to unleash the beast. I'm telling you, I did this. I don't even know what was in it, but when I tried to break it down to keep using it, being stubborn, the tank just got worse and worse and worse. So when you have something like that happen in your tank, just remove that section and toss it and replace it with new, clean, live sand. Wouldn't adding sand just trap all the yucky stuff and the detritus under the new sand? When you add only a ½ inch of sand, what happens is all that waste, it's lighter than sand. It actually, because sand beds, while they do trap dirt, most of that stuff goes to the surface because the sand is heavier. And so by doing only ½ inch, even the life that's living in the ½ inch of sand bed will bring that stuff up. It migrates it up. And all of your life will migrate its way up as well. So no, you're not trapping it or burying it under a layer of frosting, so to speak. It's going to be good to go. Someone asked, can you show me your shirt? So this is from Big Bang Theory. I got it at Comic-Con a few years ago. And I don't like the fabric, but I like the drawing. The fabric's crap. It's the cheapest fabric they could use. I don't like it. It says, rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. It's a game from Big Bang Theory. Dean, hello from England. A little bit off topic. What are your thoughts on putting boxer shrimps in a reef tank? Last I heard, a boxer shrimp is what we call a coral banded shrimp or banded coral shrimp. Is that the same one you're thinking of? Those can definitely be in a reef tank. I kind of miss having one. They can be a little semi-aggressive toward fish, but they're also, believe it or not, considered a cleaning station in the ocean, and fish will go up to them to get cleaned. And normally, we think of cleaner shrimp rather than coral-banded shrimp when it comes to cleaning fish, but both will do it. Coral-banded shrimp will also chase down peppermint shrimp and other shrimp to eat them. They will also snack on bristleworms. So if you're trying to keep their population under control, that would be a cool one to have in your tank. And if I got the wrong shrimp, boxer shrimp, then please let me know. Can you have a good cleanup crew without hermit crabs? I'm going to say no. And the reason is because hermit crabs have little claws, and they will go in and they will pick at stuff. And I remember I had an algae problem in my anemone cube, and I filled it up with snails, and the algae problem, basically it was like little tufts of green algae, were not going away. And so I went to the fish store, I went to Frank's, and I said, hey, what am I missing? And he says, do you have any hermit crabs in there? And I said, no. And he said, well, there's your problem right there. And I was like, thank you, I'll take 10 or whatever I bought, 20. I put them in the tank, and the next day, there they were, ripping it right off the rock and consuming it. I was like, oh, how did I forget this nugget of truth? So hermits are not all bad. The blue ones are a little more aggressive. I really like red legs because red legs are passive. The scarlets are awesome, but very expensive. If you're going to get blue legs, try to get the tiny ones because if they're tiny, they're less damaging is the word that's in my brain. They're not as destructive than bigger ones. Bigger ones are pretty, but they're kind of destructive to things, where the tiny ones just pick and clean, and I don't fear them at all. But if you're not able to get itty-bitty tiny little blue-legged hermit crabs, then go with the red legs. Richard asks if for a 32-gallon biocube, their sand bed, would it be better to have a conch or a cucumber? For a 32-gallon, I kind of like the idea of a cucumber, maybe even a couple of cucumbers. Or maybe one cucumber that tears itself in half and you have 2 cucumbers. So I would probably go that route in that tank, unless you can get a really small conch. The cucumber is going to be way more proactive at cleaning versus the conch. Eric, I streamed in front of the tank last week, and that was fine and all, but it was blurry. My thought is, because I understand your request, and I've watched other YouTubers do this, and I need to get on board. They film the tank in advance, and they put a green screen behind them. And I think I'm at the point where I just want to get a green screen where I can put it behind me and you'll have a nice clean video of the reef tank running in the background. So it won't be exactly like having the reef tank behind me, but it should look better quality-wise, I believe, and we'll have to see what it does. Oh, he was talking to someone else. Never mind, taking off the screen. Linda says, not all sand-sifting gobies bury coral. I have an orange-spotted goby who just chomps on the sand and never swims up to drop it. That's great. So there you go. Based on Linda's experience, you can all get an orange-spotted goby and everything's going to be perfect. And I'm not making fun of you. I'm not mocking you at all. I'm like, hey, if there's a fish out there that we can trust, and they're not all bad. I mean, there's the pearly scale goby, beautiful, elusive fish that hides a lot, and they aren't bad. You know, I mean, gobies aren't evil, but some of the sand sifters are really serious barriers. And so you just want to make sure you do some research and find out what's going to work for your system. And you may have the perfect system for it. For me, I would lose half the things on my reef, guaranteed. So that's why I don't do that. Let's see. I already answered that. If for some reason you have an area of algae that's really going wrong in your tank, you just have this patch of algae, or you scraped cyano off, or some other type of nuisance that you want out of your tank, you can stop all the flow in the tank and you can scrape and gather it all into a pile, and then you can just siphon out that chunk. Or you could lower a container in there and kind of scoop into the bowl and then lift the bowl out, and then resume all the flow. And that way you can kind of clean up when things are getting out of hand. Alrighty. Kev, I think I answered this question. If you have sand that's less than 6 months old, you can use it again. If it's older than 6 months, you should wash it out. If you don't feel like washing out, you should buy new. Oh, here's a good question. What are your thoughts on using different sizes of sand particles? What about black sand? What are your thoughts on using that? I've seen a few display sands. Okay, displays. Black sand is not sand at all. It is glass. There's no such thing as black sand on the planet. Google it all you want. It's silica. It's glass. It's volcanic. It's pretty, but it doesn't stay pretty. It looks great. You know, it looks like black velvet. You put your beautiful acan in the middle and boom, you have a fantastic picture. The problem is that black sand invariably will get dirty, and soon it looks like salt and pepper sand. So if you like that kind of look, you could do it. There's no beneficial side to running a black sand tank. It's absorbing the light rather than reflecting it. It's trapping the waste and looking dirty. It cannot help with denitrification. It's just a visual effect. So I know that fish stores will use it in some of their display tanks, like to show off clams. It's on a black background. It's like a gem. Because they're siphoning it all the time. You might see it in trade shows because it looks really pretty again, but long term, people with black sand typically don't stay with it forever. They end up removing it and going back to white. I know one guy, I saw a presentation at Mackinac many years ago, they put a divider along the front, you know, about this tall, and they put all white sand and they put black in the very front, just have that look in the front from the front of the tank. But I am sure that with flow and activity and cucumbers, the stuff would migrate everywhere, and it's not going to stay where you want it. Alrighty. Here is a question about ick. And Sean, I hate to break it to you, but I just am not a fish disease guy. And I have seen fish on very rare occasions have ick. Super rare, like 1, maybe 2. I don't see it. I don't have to deal with it. I tend to go with the premise of feed, 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 and let the fish build an immune system. Not become immune to it, but like shed it. And I know that's not going to be the kind of advice anyone else wants me to be saying, but I'm not a fish disease guy. I'm a coral guy. And the whole process of eliminating ick and quarantining every fish, for 45 days before it goes in my tank, I've never had to live through that. So it's one of the reasons you don't see me buying a lot of fish. I kind of like what I've got going on. Anything new goes through safety stop. Safety stop is not a promised, guaranteed ick remover, but it is a preventative thing for external parasites. And that's the answer. If you have an ick outbreak, you're going to probably need to pull your fish. And the general rule of thumb is you see it, your fish are infested or infected, you're going to take them out of the tank, they're going to go in a hospital tank, they're going to be in that tank for 6 weeks at least, and you're going to deal with however you're going to get rid of the ick. Could be hyposalinity, where you lower the salinity to 1.009 and keep it there for 6 weeks straight, which is very hard to do, and you've got to keep it there. If the number even goes up a point, you have to restart the clock and start 6 weeks again. So one of the reasons I've never had to deal with that is because that just sounds like a beating and a half. But I kind of look at the new fish I get. I am picky. If I see a really sick fish, or if I see a sick fish with a fish I want to buy, I usually just don't buy it because they're sharing the same water. But yeah, ick is not my strength. Oh, one person mentioned, in what order should you add the sand? That's a good question. So people, like Mac is saying here, put the rock in first and then add your sand. And that definitely is doable. If, for one thing, your rock is already sitting on the bottom of the tank, so it won't shift, in theory, assuming it does not try to slide. And we, in the past, again, I'm a live rock guy versus a dry rock guy. We didn't like putting our live rock on the bottom and covering it with sand because you were killing the rock. And you'd have all this black happen to the rock because all that got devoid? I guess that's the right word. Devoided of any kind of air, any kind of oxygen. And that killed that part of the rock. And you hated to waste it. So we did this thing where we would put PVC sections, like about this big around, depending on the size of your tank. My tank's bigger. A big PVC circle about this tall, set it on the tank's bottom panel, and have a few of them here and there, and set your rock on those like pillars. And then you'd pour sand all around it to hide it. My reef tank has an acrylic support system that I have an article about on Reef Addicts that shows how every single rock on the bottom of my tank is locked into place, cannot move. So even if all the sand were to be blown out with a power head, it won't make a rock collapse, which is intentional. But if you set rock on top of sand, as things dig, like cucumbers, conchs, gobies, then it can actually make the rocks tumble and collapse and fall down. And you want to avoid a rock slide. That's a whole beating in itself. So, yeah. And especially using dry rock, then it doesn't even matter. Put the rock right on the bottom of your tank, then add the sand. If you have sand in a bucket and you've left it in your shed, is the sand okay to use if it's less than 2 months old? Yes. You probably need to rinse it. Give it a good smell, first of all. Open the lid, smell it. I would probably rinse it clean, and then I would go ahead and pour the sand into your tank and use it. Again, if it smells sulfuric or evil, then toss it. But I've got a bucket outside that's a year old, and I popped the lid on it. It didn't smell like anything but just wet sand. So, and I didn't go through the cleaning process yet. I've been waiting for decent weather. Today it's raining. Okay. I don't know if you're joking or not, but I love this comment. Would black sand help heat the tank? You, sir, have won the live stream today. That's funny. Dean asked me, how did I come up with the name melevsreef? My name is Mark E. Levinson, M-E-L-E-V. So melevsreef is my website, and it is my username on the forums is Melev. So that's where that name came from. Thank you, Glenn. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. You, sir, are awesome. Is CaribSea Aragalive Hawaiian Black Aquarium Gravel bad to use? No, but it's not going to look clean long term. Will you have safety stop at Aquashella? I am not doing a booth at Aquashella, so I would have to have it on my person for you, which is not out of the question. If you let me know the day before, I'd probably remember to pack it with me and bring it. And those are $5 packets. And they're pretty small, so yeah, I could bring a few with me if you needed that. There may be a vendor that sells it there. I don't know. I'm like one of the leading guys in the nation that sells Safety Stop. I'm the one that pushes it the hardest because I think it's awesome. So people buy it from all over the place. And so you guys know, my website always charges FedEx ground, which is a lot. And especially if you're ordering one thing. If you guys were buying a bunch of things, shipping would make sense. But when you buy one thing like I want, 2 Safety Stops, then you're thinking, $17 shipping, that's insane. What are you trying to pull? I'm not pulling anything. That's FedEx ground. So what I do is I put it in a padded envelope and I mail it to you for about, I think it's about $5 now. The price of postage just went up again at the post office. So it was a little bit less, and now the padded envelope, the larger padded envelope they supply is $8 instead of, I think it was $7.25. And I just shipped 9 packets of Safety Stop yesterday to someone here in the US, and I think it was $5.35 to ship it. So anyway, you buy the product from my website, and when I take it to the post office for you, I'll find out what it costs. They give me a little tracking number, and I then subtract the difference and refund you that amount. So you're getting some of that money back. Do you smell acros for health? I'm trying to find someone else who does that, so my LFS stops looking at me like I'm nuts. When an acropore comes out of the water, there is a distinct smell. I don't really smell one when I'm buying it. Like, I just bought an SPS the other day. It wasn't an acro, it was a Montipora, and he bagged it up. I didn't smell it. So, yeah, I think you're a little bit nuts. It's not a terrible trait. Some guys like to smell acros, apparently. What happened? We're going down a dark path now, people. Heads up. Spoiler alert, this is going to be sad. What happened to the 2 eels you had in your anemone cube? All right, so I bought these 2 eels, golden dwarf moray eels, and I brought them home on the airplane in my suitcase, and I acclimated them, and they were awesome, and I was feeding them. And I had this perimeter bracing made out of acrylic around my tank that made the tank this much taller so that they couldn't jump out. And then one day a guy came to my house and said, hey, Mark, I need that frame right there. And I said, okay, you know, I can make you one. He's like, well, I need it now. And I said, okay. So I just sold him it for a great price because it was used. And I thought, I'll make myself a new one. But then in my brain, I started mulling it over. I thought, you know, those eels never come to the surface. Why do I have this perimeter on here? This is so dumb. It's in my way. You know, I have to reach over it. So I'm not going to make one after all because I've never seen the eel come to the surface. And that's where I made my first mistake. So one day I noticed, unfortunately, as I looked down, one of the eels was on the ground and he was dead. He'd already been on the ground probably for a day, and you know, that's that. So I tossed him out because he was dead. But then the other one refused to eat and wouldn't come out. It's like they were bonded and it was missing its mate. And I was trying really hard to feed it. I was trying a lot of different tricks. I even took my peacemaker and set it on the top of the tank and put that eel inside the peacemaker where I could reach it, and I could put food in front of it, and the clownfish couldn't steal it, and it wouldn't eat. And I went to 3 different vets trying to find a solution of how I could feed this eel. And one vet, not too far from me, gave me some kind of a feeding tube, and he said, you've got to work it through their mouth and down into their stomach and squirt the food in. And you know, the premise is that you get food in their stomach, their health will rebound. They'll get stronger, and soon, in theory, they'll start eating again. It's just their hunger strike led to, you know, a big problem. Anyway, I was trying to hold the eel in my hand and push this tube down its throat, and it was fighting back, and I felt so horrible. I just couldn't do it. I don't have the stomach in me to force something down an animal's throat. I know there's people out there that can, and I knew I was trying to save its life, but I couldn't do it. I mean, I tried repeatedly, and I felt terrible. I felt like I was hurting it. And soon the eel was rolling over on its belly and kind of belly side up in the box, you know, and it was struggling, and I felt very badly. And so I thought, well, I got to put it out of its misery. So what I did was I put it in a bag of water, and I put the bag of water and the eel inside my freezer and let it get cold and let it go to sleep naturally and die. Since then, I've learned that apparently that is considered inhumane. I didn't know that at the time. I'd heard that's how people do it. And they use clove oil. And I don't know what the clove oil does, but somehow it makes them die too. So I don't know. You got to find out what's humane for you, what you can tolerate. You know, I wouldn't do something horrible, you know, to an animal just to put it out of its misery. I just was trying to do what I thought was the best way. And I'd heard as the water gets colder, they just go into hibernation mode, and then they just kind of go to sleep, and that's that. And, you know, even when I took it out of the freezer to throw it away later, I felt really bad. You know, I felt bad for the little guy. But anyway, dark story behind me. I have not gotten any eels since. You know, they are jumpers. So I guess if there's anything to learn from it, definitely have a cover on your tank, even if you don't see any hint of them coming to the surface, because one day they might. All right. Back to sand. Thank God. When you wash some sand, you don't need to use it yet. How do you store it? Is it submerged in water? Is it drained? You know, is it got to be in a sealed container? You can just store it. There's different things you can do. You could rinse it really well, get it clean, and if it's summer, get one of those blue tarps and lay it in the sun, let it completely dry, and then store it dry. I have put it in a bucket and thrown a lid on top, and it was just damp. And later on, opened the bucket, you know, because it was in a cool, dry area. It wasn't like baked in the sun, you know. And I opened it up, and there was no weird hints of mold or anything like that. It was just damp sand. And again, this comes right back to that sniff test. Just smell it. And if it smells clean, you're good to go. If you smell anything that makes you concerned, then I would give it another rinse before you put it in your tank. It doesn't have to be RO water. Tap water is totally fine. Alrighty. I think that's it for now, guys. We're over an hour. I think we should wrap it up here. I think I did a good job. I do want to recommend to you that you test your water today. I'm going to go test mine. And then this weekend, I'm going to play with my new products that I got in. I got to try out the Camor pump and see how it operates. I got to put in some more of my Live Rock Enhance because I want to watch my Reef bubble again. Once you've done your water test, make sure you post those results. If you can share them with us here on Club melevsreef. This is our group that we use on Facebook. And this group is a super friendly group. We don't allow people to be mean. And the only rule is to be kind. So if you can't do that, don't join our group. If you can do that, or if you like that kind of environment, then join our group. And we're there to answer questions, to look at pictures of your tank, to share our experiences. You'll see Dwayne posting in there. There's a lot of smart people in there that know stuff about quarantine and about IC and about lighting and about SPS corals, about Apex programming. I mean, there's a lot of good, useful people in there. So we have a great group. And we're coming up on 4,000 members. So do welcome you there. I've got right now over 50 people to approve. I actually do the reading myself to see if the person qualifies. And if I have a feeling that they are a Russian bot, they don't get in. And we have moderators to keep an eye on things. If you see anything that bothers you, do not defend. Do not go in there and try to teach them a lesson or outsmart them. Just tell us so we can handle it. That's our job. We're here to help. We're here to keep the peace. And all you got to do is report it. That's all you got to do. So that's what I recommend. And other than that, I hope you guys have a great weekend. And yeah, there'll be a live stream next weekend at 2 o'clock. That's what we do every Saturday. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.